And no matter what it says, that's probably a good thing for everybody. For the first time in generations, Americans have reason to believe that our intelligence and law enforcement agencies gravely misused the powers we have given them, violating the civil liberties of Americans and taking sides in political contests. Well, you can't trust a government that would do something like that, and many Americans don't. That is a disaster in a democracy where the trust of the population is key. And transparency is the only antidote to that. So release all the documents, all relevant documents, and let the rest of us decide what they mean. Maybe that'll make us trust our government again. Nothing else will. Well, Democrats disagree with that. Just last week, party leaders and their lackeys in the media were yelling at the rest of us about how releasing the Nunes memo would constitute a deadly threat to America. They said that for days. And then the memo came out. Whatever you think of the memo's conclusions, you got to be honest and concede there was not a single thing in there that you should not have been allowed to see. There were no classified weapons programs discussed, no names of secret agents revealed. Democrats, it turns out, didn't want it released because it might embarrass them. So on Friday, we spoke to California Congressman Eric Swalwell. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee, right in the center of this. And we asked him the obvious question. None of this should have been secret in the memo. Why did you fight to keep it hidden? Well, Swalwell didn't answer that question. Instead, he accused us of betraying our country. Here's part of the exchange we had. In the case of today's memo, what specifically have I espoused that empowers threats to our country?
You're peddling the narrative that the Trump administration is putting out, which also is the Putin narrative, because they're retweeting this with their Russian bots. If you're on the same side as WikiLeaks and Putin,
I wonder, do you perceive
if you're on the same side as WikiLeaks and Putin, you should take a step back and wonder, whose bidding are you really doing?
Whose bidding are you really doing? So for wanting to see the memo, we are treasonous agents of Vladimir Putin. You probably grew up reading about the McCarthy era, where demagogues in Congress made baseless claims of foreign collusion, destroying the lives of American citizens in the process. You probably didn't think you'd live to see it happen again, but it has. About a year ago, we spoke to another Democratic member of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff of California, and we asked him another obvious and straightforward question. What evidence do you have that the Russian government hacked John Podesta's email account? Often alleged, never proved. So we pushed. Schiff got squirrely. We pushed him again. Here's what happened. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
And Tucker,
no, look and say, I know they did. John Podesta's emails, they hacked those.
And I think that Ronald Reagan will be rolling over his grave at your carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the... You're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked...
You're going to have to move your show to RT Russian television.
Carrying water for the Kremlin, disloyalty to America, treason. In a single year on this show, we've been accused of betraying our own country by more than 20% of the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee. What is this about? Part of it, obviously, is politics of the most cynical kind. The Democratic base has been fed Russian conspiracy theories for months now, and they're primed to believe literally anything on that subject. Within hours of appearing on this show last week, Eric Swalwell was out raising money on our, quote, attack on the rule of law. Our questions were an attack on the rule of law, by the way. Well, that's dishonorable and untrue, but at least it makes a kind of sense in a sleazy Washington way. But what if these guys are actually starting to believe the lies they tell? In a speech last week, Adam Schiff accused Russia of a crime so bizarre that even the most diabolical Soviet-era leaders never would have dared attempt it. Watch this.
They also trumpeted the Second Amendment. Apparently, the Russians are very big fans of our Second Amendment. They don't particularly want a Second Amendment of their own. But they're really glad that we have one. The Russians would be thrilled if we were doing nothing but killing each other every day, and sadly, we are.
So if you're following along at home, how determined are the Russians to destroy American democracy? Well, so determined, says Congressman Schiff, that they will even attempt to promote our own Bill of Rights. Next thing you know, they'll be reprinting the Federalist. Oh, the Slavic mind. Dastardly. This is demented, and there's no other word for it. It grows, of course, from our ruling class's unwillingness to face the lessons of last year's election. Voters rejected them. They can't accept that. They blame Russia. We get it. But at what cost, all of this? Schiff and Swalwell are not college professors. They're not CNN anchors. They're members of one of the most powerful and important committees in the Congress, one charged with overseeing our vast intelligence apparatus. They're supposed to be sober and thoughtful and smart, but they're not. Instead, if you dare ask an uncomfortable question, they accuse you of working for a hostile foreign dictator. Strictly speaking, that's a death penalty offense, by the way. This is your opposition party. These are the people who are supposed to be giving us an alternative to Trump, who they claim is too irresponsible to rule. But they're more irresponsible, and they're angrier, and they're more reckless. And most terrifying at all, they are poised to take power. 9 months from right now, at the midterms, they may. Chances are, in fact, they'll be running Congress again. These people, the ones who cavalierly accuse fellow Americans of treason, who mock civil liberties, who believe the U.S. Constitution itself is some kind of Russian ploy, they'll be in charge. Adam Schiff will be chairman of the Intel Committee. If there was ever incentive for the Republicans to get their act together, seriously, and do it fast, you just saw it. Author and columnist Mark Steyn joins us tonight. So you've traveled broadly, and you've written a lot about Russia, the Soviets, and now the Russian government over the decades. Did you ever even suspect that they were clever enough to promote our own Bill of Rights against us?
No, well, they do play the long game, the Russians. So for them to talk up the Second Amendment, if I follow Adam Schiff's argument, they're talking up the Second Amendment so that we'll all shoot each other, which will save the Russians the trouble of having to conquer us. This is brilliant. You know, Congressman Swalwell, this is how stupid it is. He accused you of McCarthyite tactics when he is the one saying that you work for the Kremlin. This is so nuts. He says also that you're attacking the rule of law. The reason some of us are upset about this is because what is going on is an assault on the rule of law.
Yes.
An American citizen who has not been convicted of any crime and actually has never even been charged with one has nevertheless been under United States surveillance on and off for half a decade. This guy's life and reputation has been ruined. And the Democrats are okay with that because he's just this week's useful MacGuffin, as Alfred Hitchcock used to call it, to distract people in the Russia investigation. It's an assault on the rule of law, and it reminds us of a very important lesson, which this memo is all about, that there's a point at which there's a legitimate intelligence community, and then there's a point at which it becomes actually secret police activities. And what they've done to this U.S. citizen, Carter Page, crosses well into the line, I believe, of secret police activities.
Well, it's certainly something that has shaken a lot of people's faith in the system, and it's in a system that you want to believe in. In fact, your population needs to believe in order for the country to function. So I wonder, though, is this a fever dream that we're going to wake up from? Like 20 years from now, we'd be replaying the Adam Schiff tape and saying there was a congressman who accused any who disagreed with him of working for a foreign power, or will they not recover?
Well, I would like to think so. I would like to think that just as Hollywood kind of gets it right 30, 40 years afterwards,
right,
that the elderly Tom Hanks and George Clooney will be lining up to play Adam Schiff in movies, and the even more elderly Meryl Streep will be playing the outrageous Nancy Pelosi as she says that Congressman Nunes has broken the laws of Congress and he should be going to jail for it. But at heart, you know, the Democrats are doing this because this isn't just a few rogue elements of the permanent bureaucracy. The two most powerful factions in the Democrat establishment, the Obama administration and the Clinton campaign, were also tied up with this every step of the way. Including, you know, whatever his title is, the Assistant Deputy Under Secretary of State, this guy Weiner, who was actually big buddies with Christopher Steele on this.
Right.
Christopher Steele himself is actually a very unusual figure who supposedly, quote, retired from MI6, unquote, at the age of 44, and is described in this memo as a longtime asset of the FBI. That's actually a breach of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangement between the United States and British Commonwealth countries. There are a lot of very weird, sinister, and malodorous aspects, and the Democrats should stop throwing distractions in the path by accusing you of being a Russian agent.
Well, I just want to say for the record, how dare you ask questions, Mark? That's not what we do in this country.
No, well, I'm a Kremlin agent, too. You should ask me that question. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Mark Stein.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, Adam Schiff has lost it, as we just said, but when it comes to Russia, he's also tried to claim that the release of last Friday's memo would result in, not making this up, more Oklahoma City-style terror attacks. Adam Schiff.
Sources of information are going to dry up. If you have a neighbor next door who's buying a lot of fertilizer and it seems odd to you because they don't have a yard, are you going to think twice before calling the FBI? Because if they get a search warrant for your neighbor and something is politicized, the political winds change, and there's an investigation, your identity is going to be revealed because you really can't trust that this is going to be kept confidential anymore.
I don't know the context of that interview. I hope the anchor pushed back against that. That is too much. Because the point is, if you support more transparency, you're basically handing a truck bomb to Timothy McVeigh. That's outside the bounds of normal debate, I would say. Richard Goodstein was an advisor to both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns, and he joins us tonight. Look, Richard, without even debating the details of this, both of us have seen the Nunes memo. You probably thought it was a crock. I thought it was kind of interesting. Yeah. But neither one of us could point to a single thing in there that imperiled American national security. I mean, it just wasn't anything. And no one says there was. In light of that, you have the ranking Democrat on the Intel Committee, big job, saying crap like that on TV. Yeah. I mean, that's too irresponsible, even for Washington, don't you think?
Well, the FBI thought there was a problem with it. The Justice Department thought there was a problem with it, which is why one of their senior people in congressional relations and legislative affairs wrote a letter saying, please do not release the memo. They had read the memo.
On what grounds?
Well, you have to ask them.
Well, I did. And I have the grounds, which is they believe that if this were declassified, that they would have to declassify a whole bunch of other stuff. And my view as an American citizen is you have to, by law, declassify everything unless you can show it imperils American national security. You live here. You know the permanent bureaucracy. It's not a conspiracy. They just don't like declassifying stuff because it obviously detracts from their power, which is rooted in secrecy. They know you don't. That's the whole game. So, like, why should I sit there and take a lecture from this Schiff guy about how I'm Tim McVeigh when I just want to see the memo?
I think everybody in the intelligence community believes that getting classified material out that shouldn't be is a problem, and it will, over time, kind of decrease the willingness of people to cooperate. Look,
I believe that too. I just want to say for the record, I believe that too. If you can show that releasing something hurts the country, I'm against releasing it. Of course I am. But what about this memo hurt our country?
The solution is to have the Trump campaign not have hired a Russian agent. I'm sorry. Look, back when the Rosenbergs were giving atomic secrets, when the Rosenbergs were giving atomic secrets to the Russians, we would have preferred that we have known in advance what they were doing. Carter Page was giving speeches in Russia in 2016.
There's so many different things here. So, one, you're conceding the Rosenbergs are guilty because the left have defended them for 70 years. I'm just wondering.
I don't want to litigate that here.
Okay. Just to be totally clear, because the Russians were the favorite state of the American left for 70 years, okay? So I just want to be clear. And they defended the Rosenbergs up until, I guess, right now. Second, which Russian agent did they hire? They never hired Carter Page, who was a volunteer. Second, you're really calling him a Russian agent?
They just paid him 5 or 6 figures amounts of money to be over there and give speeches and so forth, including one bashing the United States in 2016 at the time that Donald Trump was saying, yes, he was one of my 5 advisors along with Papadopoulos.
The Trump people?
No, the Kremlin.
Okay, the Russian government. So he's a Russian agent.
And
so you're saying that anybody who does a business transaction...
I don't think that's what it was considered.
Well, giving a speech for money is a business transaction.
Well, and starting in 2013, it was more than just giving speeches for money. He was very much, frankly, going back to his college thesis, he was very pro-Russia. Fine, you're making fun of the left for being pro-Russia.
It's not fine. So if you think... If you like Russia, that makes you anti-American. I mean,
no,
I'm kind of
what makes you anti-America is giving a speech in the Kremlin bashing the United States. It's not a business transaction. It's not something other than something that's actually considered rather unpatriotic against the backdrop of a presidential candidate saying, yes, he's one of my 5 people, with George Papadopoulos, giving me foreign policy advice.
Let me just say that the Trump campaign, I mean, that's a ludicrous claim. They didn't really have a campaign.
He said it.
I get it. He said it. I just wouldn't. I don't personally take it seriously. Second, if he's attacking the United States on foreign soil, I'm totally against that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, and I would never defend it. I think it's wrong. But it doesn't mean he's a spy. And if he is, let's arrest him and get this over with. And if he's not,
that's
let's
why they were doing surveillance on him, not just once, twice, or 3 or 4 times. And
did they arrest him? Did they charge him?
Let's see.
Oh, no. They just impugned his reputation and
let's see when
life.
Mueller issues his report. If he gives Carter Page a clean bill of health, he should be the one who says, yes, give me a reputation back. I doubt that will happen.
On this last point, can you just concede that in legal terms, a clean bill of health is not charging somebody? Okay? So his job is either to charge somebody or not. We're not interested in Robert Mueller's views on morality. We're interested in his legal judgment. Right. So if Carter Page is not charged, will you come on the show and apologize for having the federal government destroy his life?
And if it turns out that what Carter Page was doing gave rise to conduct that was frankly inconsistent with the interests of the United States, it's John McCain who's saying that what they're doing is carrying out Putin's agenda.
It's ludicrous what McCain is saying. I don't want to attack McCain on this show, but let's be honest, we both know that's pathetic.
Well,
thank you.
I don't.
Okay, well, I do. Thank you, Richard. Good to see you. Donald Trump Jr. is joining us to discuss the aftermath of the release of Friday's memo. That's next. Following the release of the House Intelligence Committee memo on Friday, Donald Trump Jr. said the memo was, quote, a piece of sweet revenge for his family and proof that the entire Russia investigation is built on a foundation of sand. Donald Trump Jr. joins us tonight. Thanks a lot for coming on.
How you doing, Tucker?
I'm doing great. So what was your reaction to the memo? What do you think the takeaway is?
Well, listen, I think the takeaway should be that Americans should be a little bit scared about what's going on right now. I mean, when you hear this stuff going on, you don't think of this happening in the United States. You don't think of this happening in a country where we have a foundation of laws and principles grounded in the Constitution. Because this, to me, seems like a clear violation of that. You have a court that virtually no one knows anything about, just haphazardly granting full surveillance of American citizens, in this case, the duly elected future president of the United States, based on shady information paid for by the opposition party's candidate in that presidential race. I mean, this is crazy stuff.
It does seem outside the bounds of what the law was written to allow, and yet it is allowed under the law, and that law was just reauthorized by the Republican-controlled Congress with very little debate. Why do you think that was?
You know, I don't know, but I think they probably want to revisit that after seeing all of this. I mean, a lot's changed since we last spoke about this basically 10 days ago, and that had happened just before this. But I think, you know, as an American citizen, to see this stuff going on, to try to subvert democracy this way, based on these characters and these people who are so biased, and flagrantly so, that is scary. I mean, it's one thing if you're doing it in a sort of bipartisan system, but that's not at all what we have here.
So this, all the things that we're talking about were allegedly committed by employees of the executive branch, which is now the Trump executive branch.
Yes.
So what's the solution going forward? How do you fix this?
You know, I don't know. I think we have to open everything up. You know, listen to the Democratic memo. I'm sure that'll be a winner, given that Schiff is doing this and everything he's been spreading for a long time. But you can see the fear in their eyes, because the one thing is we've always been in a very one-sided battle, right? Because the Republicans can have their talking points, and there is bias there, obviously, as well. But when you have the mainstream media so willing to sell for the other side, so willing to go to battle for anything the other side says, so willing to take whatever they say and just say, you know what, that is the gospel. There's nothing else that could contest what this person is saying. That's where it starts to get scary to me. So I say open it all up. But let's see the FISA court transcripts. Let's see everything that went into this. Because I think once all of that comes out, not just the rebuttal that they've had weeks to be able to say, this is how we're going to counter it, but let's see those court transcripts. Because I want to know what that judge saw when they reauthorized it. All this stuff was based on Carter Page, and yet it was reauthorized numerous times after Carter Page was not even a part of the campaign anymore. So what is their basis for the ongoing investigation?
So the rebuttal memo that you just referred to, the Schiff memo, the House Intelligence Committee has voted to declassify it. That's going to the president. Presumably we'll all get to see it soon, and the media will applaud its declassification.
Well,
they did
have
not
their talkers
applaud,
and they will run.
But they did not applaud the declassification of the Nunes memo.
No.
Was it striking to you to see reporters argue for more secrecy, that the public doesn't have a right to know?
I had a field day with that one on my social media accounts, because it was the first time in history where I'm watching the media effectively argue for less information. And, you know, touting the talking points. This is going to make it really difficult to investigate people. We're going to be giving up trade secrets. I didn't see any of that in the memo. I didn't see a thing, but those were the Schiff talking points to try to prevent it from ever coming out. And the media was more than willing to carry his bags to make sure that everyone knew that those things were going to happen and the sky was falling if this memo was released.
Huh. But none of the people calling for it to remain classified in the press had seen the memo. So
no, of course. Well, but you know, who knows what they knew, what they had seen, what they'd be given. I mean, it's not like there hasn't been leaks like a sieve from various members who were part of that and who had seen it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did know, but presumably they were not supposed to have known those things, no.
So what's your take on Carter Page, who really was at the center of that memo, which described how the federal government spied on him, based in part, anyway, on allegations in the dossier? What do you think of him?
Well, listen, again, I think the whole thing's a little bit ridiculous. I mean, this is a low-level person who worked in a campaign. This is someone who I've seen the emails where they said, well, this person's no longer working on the campaign. I believe one of my family members responded, who the heck is that individual? We'd never even heard of him. So to use that, again, as the basis to then try to attack the duly elected president, to do it then after that person's no longer even part of a campaign. And now I've been on a campaign. I get it. All of these people kind of hang around and everyone wants to build up their next thing because it means they're going to get a better job on the next campaign. They're going to get their book deal. They want to be a part of something. The reality is, he wasn't a real player in the campaign. So to utilize that person, I mean, they seem like a great patsy for that. You know, I'm sure others were utilized the same way. But the reality of the situation is that we've had an investigation going on for over 2 years where there is zero evidence. We haven't seen any investigations into all of the shade, all of the stuff that has gone on with our opponent that were actual, real things that had happened, that she was involved in, that transpired. There's not even an investigation. But you can take a fringe person on a campaign, utilize that to get all these FISA warrants, to spy on someone who'd ultimately become the President of the United States, to continue to do so based on evidence paid for by their political opponent, given and weaponized by the sitting administration at the time. I mean, what about this doesn't reek of a banana republic, Tucker? It's crazy.
Doesn't sound very American to me. Don Trump, thanks a lot for coming on tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks. Senator John McCain just released his vision for what he thinks an immigration deal should look like. The left loves it, needless to say. What should you think about it? We've got details next. Congress is just days away from another government shutdown over immigration. Senator John McCain of Arizona has released his idea of what an immigration compromise ought to look like. His bill, which was crafted with Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, would provide amnesty for millions and millions of illegal immigrants in return for zero concessions. No wall, no end to chain migration, no end to the diversity lottery, nothing. It's an absurd idea that nobody takes seriously, including the White House, which dismissed it out of hand today. But it does raise the question, where are we? What is the state of play and where are we going? Ali Noorani is Executive Director of the National Immigration Forum, and he joins us tonight. So I think this is a pretty baffling position that the left is in right now. So Trump has basically said, I will give you 3 million new Democratic voters, and all you have to do is build a wall, which you say doesn't work anyway. So what's wrong with that?
I would ask the same question, because, in fact, the president has turned down deals over the past month that offered exactly that. But let's take a step back. I think the president deserves credit for putting his cards on the table. Senator McCain and Coons have done that today, and we have multiple bills in various states of motion. The president can do something that neither President Obama nor President Bush could do and solve part of our nation's immigration problem. The deal is there to be had. He's just got to close it.
Well, but the stumbling block, one of a number of them, but the main one is the wall. And it's confusing to me why everyone, and the people who are against the wall are for more illegal immigration, obviously. But they argue simultaneously that the wall is ineffective. Mexico, for example, argues that the wall is both an abomination and it won't work. If it won't work, why are they mad about it?
Well, see, I, number one, want a secure border. I want a border that keeps us safe, but I also want...
No, but a wall.
Let me explain. I also want the American taxpayer for their money to be used the right way. So the right solution here is a combination of technology, infrastructure, ports of entry, fencing, and some infrastructure at strategic places.
Let me just say that I don't believe you. I don't come close to believe, because we're talking $50 billion or $20 billion.
You don't believe that I care about security and the American taxpayer?
Not at all.
Why?
Because we just spent $50 billion on Puerto Rico, which is not even a state. We spend $600 billion on the Pentagon every year, and we're not even really a war. We're talking about $20 billion on a wall, and all of a sudden people who don't care about spending in any other part of government are saying, oh, it's bad for the deficit. So they don't want the wall because it might work. And you know that, and I know that.
So you know what I think we should do here is we should do the Tucker Carlson, Ali Noorani deal, and that is, let's protect dreamers, let's secure the border. If you want a wall, let's take a wall.
I mean, I personally think, well, whatever my views are,
right.
Trump just offered to give millions of so-called dreamers citizenship,
right.
Not just legal status. They can vote in exchange for the wall. And the left is saying the wall, they hate the wall because it's a permanent solution. If you put up sensors on the border, you can take them down. You hire more agents, you can reassign them. The wall is forever.
We are completely in favor of a narrow solution, exactly like what you're talking about, protecting dreamers and protecting the border.
No, but you're not, though. You're for border protections that can be repealed. Hadrian's Wall is still there. The Great Wall of China is still there. Israel's wall works. Lots of walls work. That's why the left... So you'd be for a wall. Like, why not spend $20 billion on a wall?
If the Border Patrol along that are the experts on the border say, you know what, we need a wall in this particular place, let's do that. But
so they make decisions? So you're in favor of cops making policy? Is that what you're saying?
I'm in favor of experts making policy.
No, I thought the public got to make policy. This is a democracy. So if they vote for... the public gets to make policy. That's why we have elections. And they voted for a wall, so why don't they have one?
Because we want experts on the border to make the right decisions. And some places are going to say we need a wall, and other places are going to say we need ports of entry.
Wait a second. So you think a Border Patrol agent or an expert should have more authority than voters in a democracy? How does that work exactly?
How it works is that somebody who's had 20, 30 years of protecting our nation knows the best way to protect our nation.
So why have elections at all?
Because that's why you elect policymakers who set the policy so that experts can implement that policy.
But we didn't elect a policymaker. We elected a reality TV star who ran on building a wall. And people didn't elect him because he was a reality TV star. They elected him because he wanted to build a wall. And he seemed very literal about it. And they voted for that. He won. And now in Washington, we're saying, you don't get a wall. You don't know enough. So maybe I'm starting to think it's not really a real democracy, is it?
I think that we want our experts to protect the American public and the American taxpayer. Experts along the border say we need a mix of infrastructure, technology, and security like ports of entry.
But you're not uncomfortable with ignoring voters in this? Why wouldn't voters say this is a fake democracy, actually? It's an oligarchy run by people like you.
The voters have spoken, and they elected Donald Trump. He is our president.
What did he run on?
He ran on securing our border.
No, he didn't. He ran on the wall.
So then let's make sure we're securing the border.
No, let's build a wall. And anything short of that, won't that send a very clear message? Maybe you disagree with the wall. That's totally fine. You're not a Trump voter. They won. Why wouldn't they get what they want if this is really a democracy? And if it's not, let's just shut it down and let's just admit it's not really a democracy. It's run by 4,000 people who went to HBS and worked at McKinsey and now are running think tanks here. Let's just be honest about it. And the voters are immaterial. Like, that's true, isn't it?
No, who actually secures our nation is Customs and Border Patrol officers who are putting their lives on the line every single day. And if you're gonna disrespect their expertise,
I'm disrespecting them. Okay. I hate our troops. Mr. Ronnie, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you,
I appreciate it. The Vegas shooting took place more than 4 months ago, the biggest in American history. Why is the coroner, to this day, refusing a court order to release the autopsy of the shooter? It's baffling. We have details next. Strange circumstances continue to float around the Las Vegas shooting 4 months ago. Here's the latest. The Clark County coroner has refused to release the autopsies of 58 shooting victims in response to a court order. It did release them. But it refused, for some reason, to release the autopsy of shooter Stephen Paddock. The coroner claims the autopsy is still being finalized even after all this time. Dr. Michael Bodden is a forensic pathologist, and he joins us tonight. Doctor, this seems like a very weird explanation, or maybe it's not. You've got perspective. Tell us.
Well, coroners and medical examiners have always got to obey judicial orders, period. It may be in a situation where the autopsy findings may be important in a criminal investigation that the district attorney, or in this case the FBI, asked to hold off the release so it doesn't interfere with their investigation. But that sounds very unlikely in this situation.
Well, I mean, they're saying this was a single shooter event, and they haven't suggested there's anything outlandish that we don't know about. So what could possibly be the connection between the autopsy results and the continuing investigation? That's confusing.
That sounds like, especially when the body has been cremated, as I understand, so that I can't think of a reason under these circumstances where all the other autopsies have been released as a result of the judicial order, the court order, why this one wouldn't be.
What would we learn, do you think, of interest from an autopsy?
Well, it's interesting when you have 58 people die, visually seen to have been shot. Why do autopsies at all? Well, one of the reasons is to recover all the bullets that have been fired and to find if there's a bullet that came from a weapon that wasn't in the possession of the shooter. To see if there was a second shooter, possibly, would be one of the reasons. The bullet we leave behind is the bullet that comes from a different gun. So that's one of the reasons for the autopsy. The others, in some jurisdiction, not everybody is autopsied if the shooting is obviously causes the death. In this situation, in my opinion, all bodies should be autopsied, and all the injuries identified, and issues will come up of conscious pain and suffering when there's litigation, for example, and the cause of death are important because one of the things that would immediately come to mind, maybe some people died of the stampede getting out rather than of the bullet.
Of course, but but in the case of the shooter, I mean, we've been told by authorities he was the only one in the hotel room, he was the only one firing the weapon, and he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Why? I mean, those seem like the key questions. So what else could they be? They're hiding the autopsy. What would possibly, can you speculate, what would be their motive for that?
Well, the only thing is if there were some issues, and they're doing some studies on the brain of the decedent, with all the information now coming out about childhood trauma, was there some brain issue that may have been contributed to his bizarre behavior, and they may still be looking for certain special stains and chemical analysis of the brain. That could be a reason that it's not completed. But usually the reason that autopsies are not immediately released to the next of kin is to do the chemical analyses to find is there any toxicological reason why. But in this situation, the time has passed now, since October 1st, that any toxicological examination
that's a couple weeks.
Could have been done. So it's unlikely that there's a really good reason not to release the paddock to the next of kin, not necessarily to the
no, I get it. There's
public,
something weird going on
now.
Dr. Bodden, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Good to talk to you, Tiger.
Thanks. Well, an Episcopal Church congregation in Washington says America shouldn't have borders. God shouldn't have a gender. An Episcopal priest who is behind these changes joins us next. Episcopalians could at some point be praying to our parent or guardian who art in heaven. At a convention last week, Episcopalians in Washington, D.C. passed 3 resolutions. One declared the city a sanctuary diocese. The other encouraged full acceptance of transgenderism. And a third called for the elimination of gendered references to God wherever possible in case the liturgy is ever rewritten. Reverend Alex Dyer is priest in charge at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in DuPont Circle here in Washington and proposed 2 of those resolutions, and he joins us tonight. Father Dyer, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So this raises a lot of questions, but one of them is about the many millions of Episcopalians no longer with us who didn't believe anything that you've proposed. And what does that mean about them? Were they bigots?
No, I think, if you're referring to the decline in membership, that's...
I'm not referring to that, though okay. I'm interested in the subject. Yeah. But I mean, the idea that gendered language is unholy, unchristian, should be removed. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a very new idea.
That's not exactly what it says.
Okay.
In the sense of the resolution says, asks us to draw on multiple images of God.
Yeah.
Masculine, feminine, and wide diversity that's found in Scripture, that we will, as you said, alluded to, if we decide to rewrite our prayers, what we use for prayers and worship, we want to draw on that. We don't want to take away anything. We want to add on to.
But, for example, the story of Adam and Eve that kicks off the first volume of our Scriptures is a very gendered story. I mean, God creates a man and a woman, doesn't create anybody else, just those two, and that seems complete. And it's from that model that Christians have understood gender, sex.
Yeah. And I'm sure you also know, too, that there's another Genesis story in chapter 2 where God creates Adam, and then he creates a helper, and Eve isn't identified gender until chapter 3. So I think...
So do you think that Eve might not have been a woman?
Well, I wasn't there.
But is there any evidence that she wasn't?
I think what the important thing to gather away is that the important thing is that God is beyond gender. And I think when we're talking about God, we're using language, and language limits us, right? And we're talking about something that is limitless, God, that we're trying to get our heads around. But yet language is all we have in order to do that. So in a sense, don't want to limit the language that we use.
Well, I don't think that's crazy, but when I take 3 steps back, what I see is a church that embraces literally any fashionable left-wing social cause. If I put the New York Times editorial page up against your priorities, they're identical. And then I also see a church whose membership has completely collapsed. And I wonder if embracing fashionable left-wing politics has been bad for the church.
Well, I don't think that you can necessarily compare us to everything. I think what I saw when we got together in the end of January in the Diocese of Washington was a group of faithful Christians who got together and prayed together. We even had a wonderful sermon from a Baptist minister and encouraged us to follow Jesus. And I believe that's what we were doing. So I don't do these things because of my political leanings, whatever they be. I do these things because I think I'm faithfully following Jesus. And Jesus who calls us to reach out to people on the margins and to reach out to everyone.
Look, and I embrace that, and I think that sincere Christians can be liberal. I'm not saying that at all. Yeah. I drive by your church.
I believe sincere Christians can be conservative.
And I see posters attacking Trump, gun control, open borders, and it's basically the liberal political catechism. And then I look at the numbers. When I was baptized in the Episcopal Church, there were 3.5 million members. There are now fewer than 1.7 million. In D.C., your church has dropped 60% or something in the last several years.
Not quite that much, but there has been, I think there's...
Even as the city has grown. So I guess my takeaway is maybe this purely political message, which is what you're selling, isn't what people are looking for in church.
I don't believe it's a purely political message. I believe what we're selling here is trying to more faithfully follow Jesus. And so membership is a very complicated thing.
Do you think Jesus had views on gun control?
What I'm saying is basically membership has declined across denominations, not just the Episcopal Church. So I think we need to keep that
in mind. That is absolutely true. It's not across denominations. Some denominations have actually grown during the past 3 years. And none has dropped faster than the Episcopal Church.
But I think you will agree with me, Tucker, though, that as a Christian, in a sense, and your Christian viewers, we should be worried about people not attending churches across any denominations.
I couldn't agree more, but when I go to church, and it literally, as in your church, it literally could be Paul Krugman reading this week's editorial. I'm thinking, I can get that at work. Maybe there's a point where politics kills